Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvabhuta Guhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarva Vide Namaha. Om. Good. Welcome back, and welcome also to all those watching, taking this class, attending this class online. We continue with our study of Shankara's Upadesha Sahasri. We missed last week, so we'll pick up the thread where we left off in chapter 14. Chapter 14, as you... Here we go. Chapter 14, as we've seen, deals very extensively with the relationship between mind and consciousness. And that really is the crux of the matter. I think you know that medical doctors really study a lot of anatomy. They have to know all the details of all the different bits that are inside of our body. And the reason that's so critical is the locus of medical problems is the body. The locus of suffering is your mind. And recognizing that is the beginning of a rich and rewarding spiritual journey. I'm laughing because most people think the locus of suffering is their boss, or mother-in-law, or taxes, or whatever else. And they they're unable to appreciate the truth, that they are the agents of their own suffering. That's a big realization. This is where Vedanta begins. When you accept the fact that you are the author of your own suffering, which some people think that sounds grim. I think it sounds wonderful. Because if your boss or the taxes, if the taxes are the source of your suffering, what can you do about it? You can move to another place, I suppose, but you can't directly do anything about the high taxes. So, if you are the author of your suffering, that's really, really good news, because it means you can do something about it. And that's what this chapter has largely been about. To pick up the thread, so our discussion, and by the way, it's mind and the relationship between mind and consciousness. That is the source of consciousness, source of suffering, locus of suffering, just to complete that thought. We've also talked about krita krityata, the state of utter and complete contentment or fulfillment that is finally reached through a process of spiritual growth. We're going to see that referred to in this next verse, which is part of a bigger teaching. We'll start there. And this is verse 22. Akarya shesham atmanam, akarya shesham atmanam, akriyatma kriyapalam, akriyatma kriyapalam, nirmamam nirahankaram, nirmamam nirahankaram, yah pashyati sapashyati, yah pashyati sapashyati. Does that last line sound familiar? I hope so. It comes in the Bhagavad Gita, comes elsewhere as well. And it's just very nicely fits into this meter. Yaha pashyati, one who sees what is going to be discussed in the remaining lines of this verse, saha pashyati. That person sees truly. It's an idiom, so we have to add these words. That person sees truly, which means that person is enlightened. And as we go along, we're going to discuss what does it mean to be enlightened? Some people ask, how do I know if I'm enlightened? I never understood that question. If you have to ask, then it's pretty clear. Anyway, but we do want to discuss, in the context of this verse and the coming verses, what constitutes enlightenment? Saha pashyati, the one who sees truly. Who is that one? And we're going to take this verse from bottom to top. One who sees that the self, atma, by the way, atma is actually at the end of the first line, but that flows throughout the whole verse. One, yaha pashyati atmanam, one who sees oneself to be, now in the third line, nirmamam, free of my-ness, and nirahankaram, free from ego. There's a problem with words like these, which are repeated again and again in Advaita Vedanta texts, and we stop thinking about what they really mean. We have this automatic reaction to words like this. They often use, and today we use that word soundbite, something that you've heard so many times you don't even think about it. We should think about it. What does it mean to be free from my-ness? This is not my chair. These are not my clothes. This is not my ashram. Is that really what it means? Do you think that, and we've talked about this before, I and mine, does an enlightened person become allergic to using the words I and mine? And there are famous stories of enlightened people who refuse to use the words I and mine. This is teaching. This came into the room 10 minutes ago. This is hungry. This is... Anyway. And we've discussed this before. Completely unnecessary if you really get it. If you really get it, you know that language is transactional. Vyavaharika. It has a practical use. And the words I and mine have a practical use. Here, when it says one who knows oneself, atmanam, to be nirmamam, free from possessiveness, and nirahankaram, free from ahankara, it means conscious. What does pure consciousness possess this chair? That's what it means. Does pure consciousness possess these clothes? Does pure consciousness possess an ashram? Actually, it's your ashram. You paid for it. So it's really not mine anyway, even from a transactional standpoint. Consciousness possesses nothing. Does consciousness say, I am Swami Tadatmananda? That statement, I am Swami Tadatmananda, is a statement in my mind, in this mind. Now we can say this. This mind has the idea, I am Swami Tadatmananda. That's an idea. It's not a reality. It's an idea. Why should we be afraid of an idea? Why should we avoid using the word I if the word I merely refers to an idea. So let's understand, when we see these terms, and you'll see them again and again and again, free from I, free from aham and mama, and these are the Sanskrit pronouns, I and mine. It means when you are fully identified as being pure consciousness. Shuddha Chaitanya is pure consciousness. When you recognize Yaha Pashyati, one who recognizes oneself to be pure consciousness, consciousness doesn't own anything. Consciousness doesn't say, I am this or that. Consciousness has an I, but it's just I. This is a teaching of Ramana Maharshi. Just to show a little further insight about this ahankara. And enlightenment, as we've discussed before, is not the total absence of I-ness, because in a total absence of I-ness, you're in a state of absorption and you can't do anything. You're not functional. The I principle in psychology, the sense of individuality, allows us to function in the world. In the absence of I, in a total and complete absence of I, there's no functioning possible. We've had this discussion before. But Ramana's take, Ramana Maharshi, the great saint of South India, had a different approach. He said that I is always present, but not as ahankara. I. The constant sense that I am. Consciousness is present now, even if your mind is quiet. I am. That's, anyway, Ramana's teaching. Let's continue with this first. So first of all, yapashyati, one who sees oneself as pure consciousness. For that person, nirmama, there's no sense of possessing anything. Consciousness doesn't possess anything. Nirahankaram, consciousness is not the body, not the mind, and more importantly, not the roles in life. Consciousness is not a doctor or engineer. Consciousness is not a man or woman. Consciousness is not a mother or father. That's roles. Okay, next. Akriyatma. Consciousness is not an agent of action. Consciousness doesn't do anything. And if consciousness doesn't do anything, consciousness necessarily is akriyapalam, is not the recipient of results. If you don't do anything, you don't get any results. Make sense? It works like that, right? If you don't cook dinner, you have nothing to eat. If you go to work and you don't do anything, you're not going to get a paycheck for long. You get the idea. So consciousness is not an agent of action. Therefore, consciousness accrues no karma phala. By the way, if you're thinking about the doctrine of karma, consciousness doesn't reincarnate, right? Consciousness doesn't reincarnate. What is it that travels from one body to another body? All-pervasive consciousness can't travel. It's already everywhere. Those of you who understand the doctrine of karma well, you understand that it is the sukshma sharira, the so-called subtle body, that travels from one body to the next. The doership is associated with that subtle body. Therefore, karmas accrue, the fruits of actions accrue to that subtle body, and it's the subtle body that gets born again and again and again, not consciousness. Consciousness is not subject to karma because consciousness is not an agent of action. Remember my guru's joke? I said, consciousness doesn't do anything. He would joke, therefore consciousness is good for nothing. He joked like that. Interesting, this very profound senior teacher of Advaita Vedanta making a silly statement like that. Consciousness is good for nothing. Okay, then finish this verse. That consciousness is also akarya shesham atmanam. Atmanam, oneself, is understood as akarya shesham, having nothing left to accomplish. We're back to that krita krityata. Since consciousness doesn't do anything, it has no to-do list. You may have a to-do list. Consciousness has no to-do list. Consciousness is not an agent of action. Therefore, consciousness has nothing that needs to be accomplished, no agenda. My guru was very fond of that word. Now, there's a very important principle we should discuss here, and it relates to what I said before about what does it mean to be enlightened. And it kind of depends on how you define it. If you define enlightenment as the recognition of your true nature as sat-chit-ananda atma, unchanging consciousness, that could be called enlightenment. But suppose we move the bar, because enlightenment is not, we use the term atma-jnanam a lot, knowledge of atma, but in the Vedas, the primary term, we call it enlightenment, but the primary term used in the Vedas is not atma-jnanam. It is found in the Upanishads. But the primary term, as most of you know, is moksha. Moksha means freedom, and not just freedom from rebirth in the next, following this life. In this very life, moksha means freedom from suffering. We're going to make a very important point here. And that is, where do we put the bar, so to speak? Who is enlightened? Because you can gain atma-jnanam, you can discover your true nature as sat-chit-ananda atma, and not yet reach the higher bar of being free from suffering. We've had this discussion before, but you may not make the connection. Remember, we have discussed in the past how habitual our minds are. Your mind has been saturated in ignorance for how long? You have been identified with your body and mind for how long? And now, in the moment you discover, hey, I'm not that body, and I really am pure consciousness. The moment you have that recognition, and it is powerful, important recognition, the problem is, though all those years of conditioning due to ignorance and identification, are they instantly erased? In ancient times, they called it samskara, an impression formed on the mind. And modern science, modern neuroscience, embraces this fully with their idea of neuroplasticity, in which they say that changes of thinking are the result of physical changes in your brain. Wow. Changes of thinking are correlated with physical changes of your brain. Do physical things just change like that? Aging is a good example. We think it's happening quickly, but in fact, it happens very, very gradually. So here, we're talking, think about a brain with its neuroplasticity having functioned with wrong assumptions for decades and decades and decades. I am the body, I am the mind, I am this, I am that. All that identification has been there for decades, and in one moment it should all go away. Completely unrealistic expectation, which is why we place so much emphasis on, well, nididhyasana first and foremost. That's not our topic for today. Nididhyasana, as you remember, is Vedantic contemplation that is specifically intended to remove this habitual identification. They call it deha vasana, the habitual identification with your stula and sukshma sharira. Deha vasana. It takes time to remove it. How long does it take to remove ignorance? A moment. The removal of ignorance is instantaneous, but the removal of this deha vasana takes time. And to remove that deha vasana over a period of time, there's a lot of emphasis on nididhyasana, Vedantic contemplation, which is like targeted therapy, so to speak. But something else you may take for granted, what we're doing right now also helps a lot. What are we doing right now? We're engaged in a class on Advaita Vedanta. We are immersing ourselves in these teachings again and again and again. Why do we have so many classes? Why do we have so many texts? The truth can be expressed so simply, so briefly. Why does this text go on for, it's called Sahasri. Actually, I think 800 verses, I forget. It's not quite 1,000. Why does Shankara go on and on and on and on and on and on like that? There are people who would criticize it as being too verbose. Why doesn't he say things more concisely? That's missing the point. The point is, in order to gain atma-jnanam, in order to recognize your true nature, you do not need 1,000 verses of instruction. But to remove that deha vasana, that habitual identification, takes a while. Now here's the trick, and my guru pointed this out very, very nicely. He says the trick used in Vedanta is this. If Vedanta keeps telling you the same thing over and over and over and over again, you'll get bored and stop coming to class. And lose out on that opportunity to stay engaged and immersed in these teachings for a long period of time. So according to Puja Swami Tadatmananda, what Vedanta does is it tells you in different ways and keeps it interesting and keeps it changing so that you remain engaged with these teachings for a long period of time. That's the reason that is a reason for an advanced text. Actually, this is not that advanced, but it's not an introductory text. In theory, an introductory text should be enough because once you learn Tattvamasi and discover your true nature as sat-chit-ananda atma, that's over. You don't need 1,000 verses to get there. But we have all of these other teachings and texts specifically to keep us engaged with these teachings for a long enough period of time so that we can overcome this conditioning we've had since childhood, the the habitual identification with body and mind, deha vasana, that takes years to overcome. For most people, there are always prodigies. You hear stories of someone who went into a cave and then 1 year later they emerge, fully enlightened. A year to me seems like a very short period of time, but there are prodigies in every field, right? There are child prodigies, children who can play music so well. So if you can have child prodigies in fields like music and math savants, so then why not in the spiritual realm? So there are always exceptions to the rule, but the common rule is that years of conditioning requires years of deconditioning. Common sense. Fortunately, it's pleasant. It's not like, oh, you mean I have to study this Vedanta again and again and keep coming into classes. It's not like it's so miserable. None of you are grimacing right now. In fact, most of you are smiling right now. So this isn't, and this process of immersing ourselves in these teachings and hearing these teachings again and again is not unpleasant. So let's enjoy the path. In fact, there's a nice word in the next verse. I want to see that. We're going to enjoy our journey of spiritual discovery. Mamahankara yatne chaha, mamahankara yatne chaha, shunyaheva swabhavataha, shunyaheva swabhavataha, atmaniti yadijñātam, atmaniti yadijñātam, adhyam swasthakyamihitaihi, swasthakyamihitaihi is how it ends. So start in the third line, atma iti. What is atma? Atma is, now we'll go backwards once again. Atma is swabhavataha, by the very nature of atma. Yeah. So the second line, atma is, by its very nature, atma is shunya. Now if you stop there, you're in trouble. It sounds like you're a Buddhist. Don't stop. Keep going. So Atma is shunya, and here it means without, free from, devoid of. Devoid of what? First line, mama, without that possessiveness, without ahankara, as we've just discussed in the prior verse, without that identification, without yatna, effort, striving, and without ichha, without desires, free from desire, free from striving. And we'll come back to that, because that always brings up a question. Swamiji, does that mean the enlightened person doesn't bother getting out of bed in the morning? Because no desires, nothing to accomplish. We'll answer that at the end of the verse. So the first part of the verse says that Atma is subhavataha, by nature. Atma is free from mama. Again, what I said before, does consciousness possess anything? So therefore, Atma is free from mama. Does Atma say, I am Tadatmananda? So Atma is free from ahankara. Does Atma have ichha, desires? Mind might be full of desires. Those desires are revealed by consciousness, which is free from desire. And in the presence of those desires, there might be yatna, effort, striving, but based on the mind. not based on consciousness. Consciousness is free from all of that. And now the point, this is restating what Shankara said in the prior verse. So what he's now going, the new part is what he says, yadi jnatam, if Atma is known in this manner, then advam swasthaha. Then swasthaha, there is ease and comfort. Advam. In fact, advam itself means comfortably. And I had to look up this word. Advam isn't in a dictionary. Pradvam is in a dictionary. I don't know why. I think the dictionary just missed advam. By the way, there's no rule that says dictionaries have all the words. That's not true. If you think dictionaries have all the words, it's not true. Most. They do a good job, but there's no perfect dictionary. So advam is absent in a dictionary. Pradvam is a different form of the word, comes and has an interesting etymology. Adva is path. Pra-adva, going down the path comfortably. Just continuing your path of life, continuing to live your life. So therefore it ends up being an adverb meaning comfortably. And it reminds me of a nice American idiom when you say, when things are going well in life, you may not use this idiom, but some, especially younger Americans, will say, yeah, I'm cruising. I'm cruising, man. You get the idea. The idea that it's effortless. And that really is the point that Shankara is making here. It's effortless. In fact, he concludes, Kim ihi taihi. What is the use of desire and effort when you recognize your true nature as pure consciousness, which is full and complete as it is. This is the root we've been talking about, krita, krityata, that state of complete and utter contentment. That complete and utter contentment depends on the complete shift of identification from body and mind to pure consciousness. As long as you are identified with your body and mind are engaged in worldly activities, there will always and forever be desire and effort, as long as you're identified. When that identification, interesting, we usually say that identification has to be removed. Suppose we rephrase it. Instead of saying we have to remove identification with the body and mind, why don't we say it more accurately? We have to shift our identification from the body and mind to pure consciousness. Sat-chit-ananda, atma, the essence of who you are as a sentient being. It's not really destruction of identification as much as it is shifting that identification. With that in mind, then let's now consider the enlightened person who is advam, comfortably cruising through life effortlessly. Does it mean the enlightened person doesn't get out of bed in the morning? It means the enlightened person gets out of bed effortlessly, obviously. Sometimes you might struggle to get out of bed, right? Especially if it's, I have a problem with cold nowadays. So if the room is really cold, getting out of bed can be a struggle. Or if you're really tired, whatever it is, getting out of bed can be a struggle. It can also be effortless. Effortless is when, this is an unusual definition. Try this out. Effort is required doing the dishes, cleaning the house, all these duties, answering emails, whatever are these routine duties of your life. They may seem to require effort because you have in the back of your mind, I wish I didn't have to do all this, right? Again and again and again and again, I have to fulfill all these responsibilities. That gives a sense of effort. You have to push yourself to do it. And if you don't push, somebody else may push you instead. The enlightened person, and here's the unusual definition. The enlightened person has no resistance to fulfilling responsibilities. What do you have to lose? What do you have to lose by getting out of bed in the morning? What do you have to lose by going to work and answering 1,000 emails? What do you have to lose by cooking and cleaning? No big, as we say in American English, no big deal. Baat kya hai? Enlightenment and the higher bar of enlightenment, not the lower bar of the mere discovery. Shouldn't say mere discovery, it's a big deal. To discover your true nature as pure consciousness is not mere, it's a big deal. But to remove all the habitual identification, that is indeed a bigger deal, if we can call it that. That's our higher bar for enlightenment, free from identification, free from suffering. So I lost my train of thought. The enlightened person, having reached that bar, has no resistance whatsoever to fulfilling the responsibilities of life, to fulfilling dharma. Whatever is one's swadharma, one's responsibility, the enlightened person has no resistance to that whatsoever. And therefore, in the absence of resistance, it's done effortlessly. You all know how different it is. Suppose you've got 20 emails to answer. If you sit down to answer those 20 emails with the attitude of, oh God, how many emails, and the sense of resentment, then how much effort is required to answer those 20 emails? Quite a bit, right? Suppose you sat down to answer those 20 emails without any sense of resentment whatsoever. In fact, you might say, thank goodness it's not 50. It's only 20. Anyway, the point is that in the absence of that resistance, it becomes effortless. That effortless action of an enlightened person is what is often called surrender to Ishvara. Now, these sound so different. The effortless action of an enlightened person sounds, this is atma-jnanam, this is Vedantic wisdom. And then we think surrender to Ishvara is all in this realm of bhakti and it's so different. These are one and the same. Because Dharma is Ishvara. Ishvara's intelligence pervades the universe, has the laws of the universe, including laws of karma, including principles of dharma. So to drop any resistance to fulfilling responsibilities, dharma, is to I'm choosing those words intentionally. They're unconventional, but you get the sense of it. To drop the resistance is to submit yourself to Ishvara's order. My guru liked those terms. To drop your resistance is to submit yourself effortlessly. It doesn't mean submission, and I don't want to get into it. The surrender is itself a big topic, and I don't want to go there because it's really not our topic here. But I want you to understand here simply this, that the effortless action of an enlightened person is the same as the total surrender to Ishvara. That's not our topic for today, but these are not two different things, one and the same. Okay? Kim hi taihi. What is the use of all this effort if you are, what is it? Advam, pradvam, if you are cruising your way through life effortlessly. Okay, let's continue. Yohankar taramatmanam. Yohankar taramatmanam. Tata vetaramevacha. Tata vetaramevacha. Vetyanatmagnya hevasau. Vetyanatmagnya hevasau. Yonyatagnya sahatmavita. Yonyatagnya sahatmavita. Again, how do we define enlightenment? First of all, what is not enlightenment? That's what Shankara, first three lines, first three quarters, what is not enlightenment? Final quarter, what is enlightenment? And to get the meaning of this verse, you have to pick up one word in the third line, veti. Veti, one who knows. Yaha veti. Yaha from the first line. Yaha veti, one who knows. One who knows atmanam, oneself. One who knows oneself to be ahankartaram, an agent of action. I am Tadatmananda. I am the teacher. Teaching goes on effortlessly. This is all. My guru was so fond of that term, Ishvara's order. Just recognized this is what is meant to happen. You are meant to be sitting here. I am meant to be sitting here. And this is just all according to karma. Karma is an expression of Ishvara's intelligence, right? The laws of karma are an expression of Ishvara's intelligent order. Whatever is taking place is taking place. Let it take place without resistance. That's the submission to Ishvara's order. On the other hand, Shankara gives here the counter-example. Yaha ahankartaram veti atmanam. One who thinks, I am the agent of action. I am doing this. Tata, similarly, vetaram. I'm the one who knows things. I'm the one who enjoys things. I am the karta, agent of action, and bhokta, enjoyer of worldly pleasures. This is conventional thinking, right? Every person prior to enlightenment thinks, I am an agent of action, I am an enjoyer of pleasure. But obviously, such conventional worldviews, asau, the third line now, anatmagnaha eva asau. Asau, such a person is anatmagnaha. Atmagnya, knower of Atma, anatmagnya, not a knower of Atma, not enlightened. So, that question before, how do I know if I'm enlightened? If you still consider yourself to be an agent of action, if you still consider yourself to be an enjoyer of pleasures, then anatmagnaha, then you are not yet enlightened. But again, does it mean an enlightened person doesn't have a to-do list? There is a to-do list. It could be a long to-do list. Fortunately, it's not my to-do list. Then whose to-do list is it? Can you get it? Ishvara's. Not mine. Ishvara's to-do list. Dharma. Whatever is supposed to be done according to principles of Dharma, according to Ishvara's intelligent order. There can be a long to-do list, but if it's not your to-do list, it's not a burden. Effortless action. So the one who doesn't, he's giving the counterexample, first of all, in the first 3 quarters of this verse, the one who doesn't have that understanding is going to look at those 20 emails or that long to-do list and, oh my God, with that kind of resistance. The enlightened person will not have that resistance, and therefore effortlessly answer those emails, effortlessly fulfill whatever needs to be done, effortlessly submit to Dharma, to Ishvara's to-do list. I like that, Ishvara's to-do list. On the other hand, so the first 3 lines are the counterexample. And here, though, yaha anyatagnaha. So previously he said, who is anatmagnaha, who is a non-knower of Atma. Then he kind of a play on word, yaha anyata gnaha, one who thinks otherwise, other than the fellow who is ignorant. This is a double negative, one who is not a non-knower. It's a double negative. One who is not a non-knower of Atma, saha atma-vit. That one is truly a knower of Atma. And again, not the lower bar of discovery, but rather the higher bar of overcoming habitual identification and becoming totally free from enlightenment. So just to underline that point, I'm just looking at a note here. This is to define what it means to be enlightened, because these 2 different bars are different, which means we use the word enlightenment very casually. Nothing wrong with that, but we have to learn to distinguish that there is a moment of recognition. In fact, you've seen me give this timeline of enlightenment. There is a moment, it's nice to see the whole timeline, just briefly. There's a moment when you recognize that worldly accomplishments will never give you perfect contentment and peace. That is a momentary recognition. That momentary recognition of the insufficiency of worldly life to produce perfect contentment. That's the beginning of a spiritual journey. Spiritual journey begins with that momentary recognition. Then that journey continues for a long time because it takes a long time to get fully prepared for the discovery. We call it adhikaritvam, preparedness. So there's the recognition of the recognition, let me turn it around different words. Recognizing the need for spiritual growth, followed by a long process of spiritual growth, followed by another momentary recognition. First recognition was recognition of the insufficiency of worldly activities. This recognition is the discovery of your true nature as sat-chit-ananda atma. Again, momentary. But once again, just as the first recognition was followed by a process, the second recognition of your true nature is also followed by a process. This is a process of assimilation. It's a process of removing habitual identification. So please have in the back of your mind that we use the word, just like we use the word karma very casually and it has a more precise meaning, in the same way, even the word enlightenment has a more nuanced, has these two meanings when it's understood in a nuanced way. Okay, let's see just one more verse. I went the wrong way. You have to push the right button, right? Okay. You'd think I'd learn that by now. Yatanyatve pitaratmyam, yatanyatve pitaratmyam, dehadishvatmano matam, dehadishvatmano matam, tathakartura vijnanat, tathakartura vijnanat, palakarmatmatatmanaha, palakarmatmatat. We'll see this briefly because it's a restatement of what we've understood, but he's adding one important thing. He's saying, we have this confusion, who am I? And due to ignorance of who you truly are, there's a confusion of where I end and where the world begins, where I end and my body and mind begins. So here Shankara observes, let me give you the technical term first so that we can make sense of the verse. Shankara calls it, and Shankara is famous for this particular observation, he calls it anyonya adhyasa. Anyonya, mutual, adhyasa, superimposition. Anyonya adhyasa. And what Shankara means by anyonya adhyasa, mutual superimposition, means this. The I-ness that belongs to consciousness, your essential self, that I-ness gets superimposed on your body, your mind, your roles in life. And contrary-wise, the conditions of your body and mind get superimposed on consciousness. When you say, I am male or female, conditions of your body are superimposed on consciousness. When you say, I am happy or sad, conditions of your mind are superimposed on consciousness. So Shankara calls this anyonya adhyasa, mutual superimposition, the I-ness of the self superimposed on body and mind, the conditions of body and mind superimposed on consciousness. And that's what he describes here. He says, yatha, in the same way, anyatve api, even though atma is different from your body and mind, even though Atma is different from your body and mind, even though, and taratmyam matam, you have to connect those words. Taratmyam is a technical word for identification. We use this technical language. Identification matam is embraced, mentally embraced. Identification with what? Dehadishu atmanaha. Identification of your true self with the body, mind. So this is superimposing I-ness on the body and mind. How long has that been taking place? Decades and decades. There's our dehavasana. So the I-ness is superimposed on the body and mind, and then anyonya, the flip side, tata, in the same way, akartuhu avijnanat, due to not knowing, avijnanat, due to the absence of knowing Atma as akartuhu, as a non-agent of action, then what? Phala karmatmata atmanaha. That you take yourself, atmanaha, you take yourself to be phala karma atmata, to be the agent of action and the reaper of results. Now, this is complicated language, but what he's saying is really quite simple and obvious. Failure to recognize your true nature, what my guru liked to call self-non-recognition, is the root cause of suffering, because in the absence of self-recognition, the difference between I and that, or I and this body, this mind, this happiness, this sadness. It's a this. It's not an I, right? When you feel happiness and sadness, is that happiness and sadness an I or a this? Obviously, it's a this. This is present in my mind. This mood, this feeling is present. Then why do you say, I am sad? If sadness is a this, why do you say, I am this? I am I. This confusion, the failure to distinguish, as I said before, where I end and the world, including the body and mind, begins. The failure to distinguish that is the beginning point of suffering. And the reason is so obvious. The moment you identify with your body and mind, you own all the problems of your body and mind. And further, those problems don't end at the body and mind, because this body and mind has a role in life. So this body and mind has a long to-do list. This body and mind has 20 emails to answer. So all these other problems come along with the package. And it's not a very convenient package. It's a package of suffering, all of which takes place due to identification with body and mind. But as Shankara has said so beautifully here, when we overcome this habitual identification with the body and mind and identify ourselves instead as pure consciousness, then that package of suffering just goes away. Body doesn't go away, but the body as a source of suffering goes away, because it's not my body. And again, this is how the enlightened person says. It's not my body, then whose body is it? Ishvara's body. It's not my mind. Remember, vyashti samashti, part and whole. Everything is Ishvara. So therefore, this body is a part of Ishvara's body. This body belongs to Ishvara. It's his problem. Let him deal with it. And he, by the way, Ishvara does deal with it, and through Ishvara is also in the form of doctors. So Ishvara will deal with it in the form of doctors, and then the problems of the body will be managed as well as possible. Anyway, the concluding point here, this body belongs to Ishvara. This mind belongs to Ishvara. The to-do list belongs to Ishvara. The responsibility to answer 20 emails, it all belongs to Ishvara. It doesn't go away. It belongs to Ishvara, and then what it becomes your relationship to all that, there's no resistance. To deal with all that becomes effortless, without any resistance. That's a very nice message we've gotten this morning from Shankara's teachings, and we'll conclude now. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om Tat Sat.